Hi everybody, welcome to the resurrected edition of the Austinoid Review. My name is James, and thank you for being here today. So, I want to eventually get back in the habit of reviewing newer content for this channel, and occasionally a Star Wars opinion if I have anything worth saying. But in order to do that, I finally had to review this movie, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. I do freely admit that as soon as the credits to this movie rolled, I was stunned into silence, which I'm not sure if that has ever happened before in my entire life. I typically have something to say to the person next to me or to a common stranger I might strike up a conversation with once the movie's over. But this was a lot to take in, and like I say, was just completely at a loss for words. Luckily, it was the holiday season. I was actually going to leave town to visit relatives, and so I was driving along the highways of Texas collecting my thoughts. And so, long story short, just to cut to a bit of a chase here. Did I like this movie? No, I did not. Did I hate it? No, but it definitely was a lot to take in and just was not my cup of tea. This movie was not for me. So, let's see. I'm going to be consulting my notes as often as I can, but hopefully I'll be able to get this review done in one take, and with very little editing, because I want to get this out here so I can move on. Finally, this movie is a mountain that I've been trying to scale time and time again, and I'm finally at the summit, and I want to just shout out my opinion about this movie so I can move on to other reviews for this channel and just get back in the gear of things. Gear? I'm not sure if I made up a new phrase or not, but that's what I said, and I'm sticking with it. God, I'm rambling tonight. I also had a hard time because I didn't want to just be part of a vast echo chamber on the internet saying roughly the same thing. I wanted to have something sort of unique, or at least one thing that no one else was saying about this movie to add to the discussion. I didn't want to just be like Hannibal Lecter walking into the crowd at the end of the movie and just becoming one person blending in with everybody. I had to have something that would make my opinion stand out, and I think I finally got something. So, to quote Ben Affleck's Batman, well, here I am. So let's get to this. So, plenty of people I know liked this movie because they appreciate every Star Wars movie, and they have a hard time ranking the Star Wars films because they just like them all. That being said, I also know a lot of people who were hurt by this film. One of my oldest friends, in fact, I was thinking the other day how disappointed I was because I used to have a voicemail saved on my phone from the night my friend saw The Last Jedi, and it's like 3 or 4 minutes of him just going, dude, I just saw it, I can't wait to talk about it with you, and this happened, and this happened, and this action set piece, and I can't believe that they fit this in, and oh, this character showed up, and it was one of the most excited, happy voicemails I'd ever had left on my phone. And that same friend, I caught up with him a few days after Rise of Skywalker came out, and they just kind of took a deep breath and said, yeah, it was okay. I had another friend who had really been hyped for this film, and I saw their social media post after they watched it, and there was such a look of just disappointment on their face. That's what I think of when I think of someone's life being shattered because of a movie. So that's why I've had trouble with reviewing this film. I know people who have liked it, but I also know people who have been devastated by it. So it's kind of hard to get past that bias that I may feel because this movie hurts people that I know. But, let's see. Okay, talked about that. Da-da-da-da. So, in a nutshell, I feel like this is the type of movie that looked good on paper, but just didn't quite gel when it finally was put on the big screen. It definitely screams a movie that was made by committee, and they had to insert certain lines of dialogue to make up, or at least attempt to make up for what were the perceived failings of The Last Jedi, a film I like, by the way. It reminded me a lot of Jurassic Park Fallen Kingdom, which is also a rather underwhelming movie, but, bear with me, and, oh, by the way, spoilers for this movie if you haven't somehow seen it over the last 5 months. I don't know why you'd be watching a review of a movie not expecting spoilers by now. But also spoilers for Fallen Kingdom. But if you had pitched a movie to me where the island is about to explode, they need to get the dinosaurs off the island, and they actually have a debate on whether or not they should do so or just let nature run its course, and then of course an illegal operation takes place. There's some hidden backstory to John Hammond's associate that kind of hints at a darker attempt at cloning that John Hammond may or may not have been involved in. And then you have the final act kind of almost hearkening back to the horror movie elements of the first film. And I say that as a kid who had to, have a bathroom break during the kitchen scene of the first movie. But really, I was just too scared to stay in the theater. If you had pitched that Jurassic World movie to me, I would have actually gone along with it and said, okay, we got something here. And there's a lot in Rise of Skywalker that if this had been pitched to me, I would have thought, okay, we have some interesting ideas here. Let's roll with it and then assemble it and see what we got. And just like Jurassic World: The Fallen Kingdom, this one just doesn't quite gel. Okay, am I done with this notepad? Yeah. I'm going to try to start out with the positives here, just because I don't like being entirely negative on the internet. I like to go against the grain a little bit. So here we go. The ending actually is one thing that I can say I enjoyed the most. Specifically, when the final space battle was happening, and the element that leads to victory isn't, the Resistance or the Rebel Alliance or the Jedi Order. The main contribution was the fact that everyday people of the galaxy brought their ships, and they saved the day. They decided to rally against the First Order and to put an end to it. And that was a very, I thought, creative way of solving a problem that had been prevalent in the previous two films. I don't like how in The Force Awakens there is no big resistance fleet. There is no real military to speak of to stand up against the First Order. And that lack of a political element and a military element really made The Force Awakens a underwhelming experience for me as I rewatched it back in 2015. And The Last Jedi carries or picks up after The Force Awakens, so it kind of inherited that element. And yeah, it's really just a few rebel or resistance ships that are flying through space being chased by the First Order. And so these Star Wars movies never seemed to have much of a war happening. It seemed to be just a minor skirmish between two radical elements of the galaxy, the First Order and the Resistance. And with this ending, it then just has the everyday people rising up to earn their own freedom. And that's an element I can actually respect, and so kudos to the film for tossing that element in. Another thing that I want to toss in there is that the Disney sequel trilogy has at least given us the opportunity to revisit things from the original trilogy that always kind of bugged me, and for lack of a better term, fix them. I never quite understood in Return of the Jedi how Palpatine, or why Palpatine wanted Luke to kill him. He has his lightsaber on his chair, and he's beckoning Luke, saying, "Strike me down with all your hate, and your journey to the dark side will be complete." I always wondered, why does a villain want to be killed? What's the deal here? Is he doing a comic book villain thing where, once you kill, you'll get addicted to it? although that really doesn't make any sense, and that's a comic book bit of logic I never quite agreed with, but I digress. But no, if you go by the Rise of Skywalker, I like this element that they tossed in, where no, if Palpatine gets struck down in hate, he will then possess the body of the person who killed him, and that's why he's beckoning Rey to kill him. And so that element actually makes me appreciate Return of the Jedi a bit more, because now we know, oh, well, if Luke had been tempted by the dark side and had struck down Palpatine would have taken over Luke's body, and then he would have been free to rule the entire galaxy in good health, at least until his body decays again. Brief time out here. Please don't mistake that comment where I said that one element made me appreciate Return of the Jedi a bit more as a way of me condoning Disney's purchase of Lucasfilm in the first place. I'm not going to be that easy on the evil empire. But those are the big picture items that we have very little control over, corporate ownership and whatnot. Along the way, it is nice to see movies like Rogue One changing things up by explaining away the design flaw in the Death Star as being a sabotage effort, or Solo, a Star Wars story, having Han shoot first, kind of making up for that alteration George Lucas made in the 90s. So, thank you for your time, and now back to our regularly scheduled program. So, appreciate that element, and it actually was a good idea, a good contribution from Chris Terrio and J.J. Abrams. Chris Terrio, I do want to say real quick, I do have a mixed to complicated take on the guy. He did write one of my favorite comic book films of all time, Batman v Superman. But even I, as a fan of Batman v Superman, admit it is too complicated for its own good. And I do think Chris Terrio should at least get as much of the blame for that film's, what's the right word? I don't know. I'll just say he should get half of the blame for that film's mixed reception. And too many people just rag on Zack Snyder and say he was solely responsible for the negative reactions to Batman v Superman. That wasn't very fair. So, what else do I got here? And so on that note, I guess I'm going to start moving on to my negatives. Chris Terrio has what I would call a Dark Knight problem. Now, to those of you who know me, you must be thinking, James, what do you mean a Dark Knight problem? You love The Dark Knight. You're a Batman fan. Dark Knight is one of the best sequels of all time. How can you say Dark Knight has a problem associated with it? Here's what I mean. I love The Dark Knight, but I can only watch it maybe once or even twice a year. To me, it is not a very rewatchable film because there's so much packed into it that it has a 2.5-hour runtime, but what feels like 4 hours of plot. And there's a lot happening with it, but you go along with it because of all the performances involved, and that element fits the film because the Joker is the one building tension throughout the movie, and that eerie theme by Hans Zimmer, where it's just like one chord being played on a like a cello or an electric guitar. I forget which. It's being played literally with a razor blade, and it's just and so that amount of plot shoved into a movie and that tension that's built up around it just feels right for The Dark Knight. But if you're trying to imitate that formula, and I do think Chris Terrio has tried to imitate that formula before, because he was quoted in the build-up to BVS saying that he watched the Nolan trilogy over and over again to the point where it was like he was remaking it. And I think that Chris Terrio, I think he means well, but I also believe that he has time and time again tried to replicate the Nolan movie formula, and what we get is not a soaring symphony of words, but instead more of a Bizarro Superman type script. And so I do have to put that out there and say that Rise of Skywalker would fall into that category. This negative I'm going to chalk up to J.J. Abrams because also at the end of the day, you have another movie built on looking for a map or a key to unlocking a map, which was exactly what they did in The Force Awakens. It was just hunting for a map to get to Luke Skywalker, and now we're hunting for a map to get to the Sith planet. It just Death Stars and map finding shouldn't be repetitive things to go to for a Star Wars movie, and that should have been rekindled. Rekindled? No, that implies to light a fire or to keep it around. That should have been sacrificed or rewritten in order to just give us something a little more fresh. Okay, moving on to the character of Rey. This is also where a lot of my negatives come about. Making her a Palpatine was a terrible idea. If you like the message that the movie was trying to send, that it does not matter who you were related to, more power to you. I do agree that, yeah, your family should not dictate your personality and who you are. That being said, it was done better in The Last Jedi. Having Rey be nobody brings back to me the original upward mobility of the original Star Wars trilogy. One consequence of the Star Wars prequels is that George Lucas introduced the concept of midichlorians. And that meant that suddenly the Star Wars universe felt a whole lot smaller. And it didn't matter how much willpower you had. All that mattered is you had to be related to somebody, and your midichlorian level would have jumped off the scale, and suddenly you're a Jedi. It turned Star Wars into, at best, a smaller space opera type story, or at worst made it more of like a space eugenics wars of some kind. And the midichlorian thing just left a bad taste in my mouth. But by having Rey related to nobody, as Rian Johnson wanted to do in The Last Jedi, meant that, you know, if you did have a rough upbringing where you grew up alone on a desert planet, scavenging for whatever you could find and just trying to earn a living, maybe that initiative gave you a connection to the Force. That, to me, is more uplifting a narrative than, oh, she's a Palpatine. It was a very regressive move, something that should not have been retconned, and is, looking over my long list of things, it probably is my least favorite thing about The Rise of Skywalker. It should not have been done. Her line saying that she was all the Jedi, seriously? It's almost as if after Robert Downey Jr. came back for a reshoot to film his "and I am Iron Man" line for Avengers Endgame, they had him get up and they put Daisy Ridley in front of that green screen to say the Star Wars version of that exact line, "I am all the Jedi." It took me completely out of the movie. In fact, I always say, do not remind me I'm watching a movie while I'm in the theaters. I want to be able to escape into this fictional universe that has been created. And when you have a blatant ripoff of a major blockbuster that came out in April of that year, yeah, I'm going to notice, and it's going to rob people of a good theatrical experience. Really quick, also, the movie didn't really have any consequences to speak of. Chewie died, but he didn't. 3PO had his memory wiped, but he didn't. They had a backup. The Kerry Russell character, we saw the planet she was on, at least I think it was that planet, get blown up. But it's okay. She's alive and she's with the fleet that shows up at the end. Nothing that seemed to add any weight to the film seemed to have that much staying power. It was just completely swept under the rug as soon as they could just undo what they had done. So you'll notice I haven't talked about Kylo Ren yet. Well, my one thing, the one unique thing I wanted to add to this video that I thought about over the last few months was how to handle his story arc. So in addition to recapping the movie and giving my pros and cons about it, I wanted to talk about the stuff I would change to, in my book, make it a better film. So, if I could snap some things out of the movie and add others, here's what I would do. In the beginning of the movie, you show Palpatine's transmission announcing his intent to retake power in the galaxy. This would give us a chance to see the First Order and the Resistance hurrying to try to find the planet Palpatine is on. And you can have multiple transmissions from Palpatine threatening the galaxy and just being evil, which Ian McDiarmid does so good. You could also include a transmission or have Kylo Ren and Palpatine talk via the Force, where Palpatine makes his offer to Kylo Ren to form an alliance, so Kylo Ren can initiate the final order. The rest of the movie would play out as it is. You can have Rey and Kylo fight, and he can be wounded. She heals him, goes away, and then you have the heart-to-heart with Han Solo. You get that bit of Kylo Ren being redeemed. But here's where I kind of throw a wrench into everything. You would eventually have Ben Solo get to the Sith planet first, confront Palpatine, and then you have the plot twist where Palpatine says he is behind all the voices in Kylo's head for his entire life. He's been the one slowly but surely driving him toward the dark side. And Kylo Ren, being Kylo Ren, Mr. Let the Past Die, unleashes his anger and kills Palpatine, which leads to Palpatine taking over Kylo Ren's body. We suddenly have Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, turned into this tragic figure who had been redeemed but was cut down by his own anger. And in the final act, we have Rey fight a Kylo Ren who is dead and whose body is now possessed by Palpatine. Maybe I just like messing with people, but that would be my solution to the debate over whether or not Kylo Ren could have been redeemed in this movie. I've heard passionate arguments from people saying no, because he killed Han Solo, he lacks any means of being redeemed. But I've also heard people equally passionate in their arguments that, as we learned in The Last Jedi, no, he was clearly conflicted, and through Rey, he could have been brought back to the light side. And I don't know, this is my solution, and I think that this is how you have a final act with genuine consequence. You have him redeemed, yes, but then turned into a tragic figure who fell through his own anger. So I think that's a way to keep both sides of that Ben-demption debate happy, but also not entirely satisfied, which is what a good ending ought to do if you want to at least have it stand out a bit. So guys, I hope you enjoyed my rambling take on Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. It's good to be back. Like, share, subscribe, you know the drill. Check out some of the newer videos too. James Waddington has some great videos where he reads stories from the Star Wars prequels. They'll make good little bedtime stories for the kids if y'all need one. That's about all I have. Thank you for having me into your homes or having me on your mobile device as you hear me talk about this movie. And y'all take it easy.